thoughtful ideas and suggestions for guests and topics.
Great events, programs, and all the countries and listen to
Welcome to this week's segment of Dialogue Houston. I'm your host, Lawrence Payne. To our regular viewing audience, welcome. To those joining us here for the first time, perhaps for HCC's TV's Dialogue Houston, we're here now every Tuesday and Thursday at 6 a.m. and again at 6 p.m., Saturday afternoons at 3 p.m. Always on top of the hour, let me thank you for your thoughtful calls, emails, and text messages concerning previous shows we've aired here on HCC TV, but also your great ideas for thoughts, for guest topics and subjects to be covered on upcoming segments of Dialogue Houston. For after all, this is your community affairs, public affairs show here on HCC TV, now in its 25th season, thanks to you. We're very proud of celebrating our 25th anniversary. And so as we bring great shows and programming to you during this anniversary year, we're really going to look into what is happening in Houston and more importantly, what's happening in Houston's future as we go forward as Houstonians. We have a great show planned for you today. We're going to look at an aspect of life here in Houston with an organization who we've featured many times on this show over the years. It is really a dive into looking at how we as Houstonians from a humanities standpoint, how we work, live, treat, understand, and deal with each other in this arena called racism. In this wonderful world of diversity called Houston, there's still such a thing, unfortunately, as racism, institutional racism to be exact. And so it mirrors and it kind of gets into issues of social, economic, political realities in our lives, in all three spheres of our life, our personal, professional, and public life. It has a way of affecting all the things we do as human beings and how we treat and relate to other human beings. But we're fortunate in Houston for the last 30 years to have an organization that understands all of that, that dwells deeply into the issues and getting down into the weeds of what it really means to be able to work through a lot of this stuff. And then there's our own Center for the Healing of Racism. And you know the name, Dr. Sherry Steinwender, who's been the head of it for all these years. She's joined now by Dr. Saundra Boyd here at Central College Psychology Department. They have teamed up, as they have for many times and many programs over the years, to bring you a great conference, which we're going to talk about right after the break. I'm teasing you with it right now because I'm not going to tell you about it till after the break. We're going to talk about what we've done thus far in these wonderful, glorious 30 years of the center being part of it. Welcome, Sherry.
Welcome, Sam. Thank you much, Larry.
So great to have you here. I mean, I've been wanting to do this for a while. You've been on over the years.
Oh, yes.
But it's been a little while since we've had you on, so it's good to have you here. Let's just bring our audience up to speed. Tell us about the founding of the center and what it has really been doing these wonderful years.
The founding of the center was in 1989. And the center was founded by a very diverse group of people, third generation Japanese American, Latin American, African American, European American. So we decided that we really needed to talk about racism. That's a conversation that falls under the title, don't talk about politics,
Exactly.
don't talk about religion. Well, you don't
Particularly
talk
if you want
about
to keep
racism.
your friends, right.
Really. So we decided this is what we wanted to do. And it was really hard in the beginning to be able to sit down with people that look totally different from you, from different ethnic groups than yourself, and have this for real, honest conversation. Out of those conversations around the kitchen table emerged a nonprofit organization called the Center for the Healing of Racism. This organization, we found many people wanted to have these conversations. And so it took us not just all across Texas, but we have been in 45 states already in 2 countries.
Wonderful.
Because we find that people really want to have these conversations. And that's why we're able to keep going.
And you do it in a very trained, facilitated way that makes people comfortable. You create the crucible of safety that people can have these kind of critical conversations.
Yeah, and see, the other thing too, when people show up, it's really critical to their healing to provide that for them. Because if we were going to, go off and start calling people racist and, we got healing in our name. Those two things don't go together, Larry.
right.
You cannot have healing and then further traumatize people
Exactly.
by calling them names and calling them a racist.
Right.
So it's done very thoughtfully. The program's put together very thoughtfully. And the organization really is run by two people of two different ethnicities. Because let's face it, our history, Larry, you and I,
Right.
have not been the same in this country as Sandy Boyd.
Right.
So we have to bring that voice into consideration, and that's how we work a great deal of the time, of people from two different ethnic groups.
Sandy, you've been involved in this for a long time too. So
29 years I've been doing this.
Yeah. So tell us from your perspective, how does all this play out?
Racism was a problem for me since I was a little child. And I saw the ambiguity people had, the hypocrisy, and the fact that people would say one thing about people and treat people in a different way. And that's bothered me for a long, long time. I became a psychologist because I wanted to learn, why does man behave like a perfect idiot?
Okay.
And racism to me is perfect idiocy. How can you expect people to work and be the best they can be if you're going to diss them?
Right.
And put them down and say bad things? But it's ridiculous. And so for us to diminish people and prevent them from doing the best they can, becoming the best they can be, we're shooting ourselves in the foot. So it never made any sense to me. And I had tried various and sundry things and looked at different things, trying to figure out how are we going to deal with this. When I found the Center for Healing Racism, finally, here's a way we can get over it. Because we're so deeply conditioned, we've got to figure out how to get over it.
Because racism is so ingrained in the fabric and fiber of this country because of slavery, moving on from racism without dealing with the past of slavery, not having, in a sense, what South Africa did, a Truth and Reconciliation conference and agreement, can we really just move forward without stopping to truly, finally address the sin of racism and what it has created in this country? The racism that we see today is directly still related to that.
And, you know, it's very interesting, and I hate, you know, putting out all of these cliches, but I have to say, if you're really going to understand what's going on today, you have to take that trip backwards.
Yes.
In order to be able to move forward,
Right.
conference title,
Right. Right.
Yeah, a way forward.
Right.
We have to know what happened. And I was talking to the guests in the green room, and I was just telling them, we've all been hurt around this thing called racism.
Yeah.
And so you write a book and you talk about the miseducation of the black man, but hell, we've all been miseducated.
Yep.
And this miseducation,
Right.
we need to come up with ways to get better, accurate information in order to be able to move forward. And so even throwing the other cliche out, Sankofa, we need to return to the past and reclaim that which was lost in order to move forward. We need to do that.
And since institutional racism and white privilege go hand in hand, you have to still be able to address the issue of white privilege. I always thought it was interesting that white privilege, the person who kind of made it understandable, Peggy McIntosh, really this white woman, kind of as Saundra said, who saw it, experienced it, understood it from her perspective and realized that she was a beneficiary of white privilege without even doing anything to earn it, just because she walked around in white skin and was treated differently.
Totally, totally. It took me a while to really get it. I had never heard of white privilege when I went to the center. And it was like, it was shocking. Because I certainly don't make an effort. And it took me a while to see the myriad ways in which I have benefited. Just, I walk in a place, it changes. When they told me I had the privilege of, financial stuff, I began checking that out. I would go in places as ragged as can be, without my checkbook, and I could get whatever I wanted. I was amazed the degree to which this skin allows me to do things you folks can't get away with.
Right.
And I don't know why, but from the beginning of, as long as I can remember, I could see, it's not fair. So whatever ethnic, religious, worldview, philosophy, I mean, the golden rule is just kind of obvious in the real world. I remember my mother saying to me, how would you feel if somebody did that to you? And so when I see people saying these racist things to me, I'm like, how would you feel if somebody said that to you?
Yep.
And so I've been bothered by that. And getting to the point we can get over the barrier that's been created between us is a bit of a struggle. And healing racism does that for us.
And you have to look at it. Without racism, there could be no white privilege. Without white privilege, there
Exactly.
could be no racism.
Exactly.
You know, that's a good formula
Yeah.
to really be able to focus in on.
Yeah.
And Sandy said it very well. She said all of these things that she didn't really just ask for them. And in fact, there's nowhere she can go to give them back.
Right.
She can't go show up somebody and say,
Doesn't
well,
work.
here's
Right.
Sandy
Doesn't work.
Boyd
Right.
checking in my white privilege.
Yep, yep.
So there's no way she could go to give
Yeah.
it back. But the thing of it is that I need from Sandra is to acknowledge that she have it. And I don't want to take anything away from her working hard,
But that's the
studying
acknowledgement
hard,
that it
going
exists.
to major
Yep.
universities. That's all well and good. She need to be rewarded for
Right.
those things. But I'm talking about something that white skin give her. It's a boost up that people of color don't get by skin color.
And what I want is for you to have the same privilege. That seems fair to me.
That's a good place to take a pause and take a break here. We're going to come back and pick that same thought up. So the question that we've asked, and we've done this in exercises, when you walk into a room, you ask people, what does it mean to be white? You get this silence. I've done this many, many times. You get this silence because what it means is never to have to think about what it means to be white. You ask a group of black people, what does it mean to be black in your skin every day in this society?
They know.
You want to talk about the last time I got pulled over, just 2 nights ago? So it's that reality. And so because it is the reality, it is not the vision. The vision is humanity. The vision is all of us getting along together and working together and thriving and developing together. That's the vision. The reality is pulling it down, the vision down every time we talk about it because of institutional racism. But as Sandy said, she wants the same thing that white privilege affords her for everyone. The question is, how do we get there? Stay tuned. We're going to take a small break. And when we come back, we're going to dive into that second part.
HCC. So many reasons, so little tuition. Register today at hccs.edu/now.
When I was growing up, my mom was extremely tidy. We were trained to put things back where we got them from. One day, when I walked into my mom's house, I felt like I walked to someone else's house. There was stuff everywhere. And just growing up the way I grew up and to see this transition was very alarming.
When Sean talked to me, it was a wake-up call, and that's when I went to the doctor.
If you're with us for the first part of the show, you know we're having a fascinating conversation with our guest from the Center for the Healing of Racism. Right before the break and the pause, we took this question, what does our common humanity look like going forward? How do we get to we and us? We're locked sometimes in this deep discussion about I and me and our isms that go with I and me. And then you have this other thing creeping back in like it did in the 60s, us and them. I've heard us and them more than I have since 1968 in the last couple of years. So there's this, the fabric and fiber of our society and the democracy as citizens is being pulled apart in many different directions. I think humanity, even the question of humanity, what does it look like, act like, and sound like, is having a hard road to go these days. Let alone common humanity, just basic humanity.
And it's not just an individual thing.
No, it's not.
There are systems. There is a whole system of institutions of oppression. And so about 18 months ago, we were asked the question, when are we going to talk about institutional racism? And several of us were like, how about now?
Right. We're living it every day,
If not now,
right?
when?
Right.
And if not us, who?
Right.
If not here, where? And so we started on this journey to figure out how to talk about institutional racism. And as soon as I started looking, I began finding places where institutions, the city of Charlotte, is making a major effort to institute a way to get at institutional problems and overturn them. There are police departments around the country that are working on ways to retrain their police officers to de-escalate violence, to become more culturally sensitive. There are hospitals recognizing not everybody gets the same quality of care in the medical field.
Right.
So they're trying to train doctors and nurses to be more culturally sensitive in the hopes that there will not be that institutional barrier. There are schools making serious efforts to get teachers to be more culturally sensitive, so they're treating all their children the same way. So it's happening in institutions across the country in various and sundry places, not every place. And so we thought, what if we showcase the organizations, institutions that are trying to make change as a way of saying, hey folks, this is doable.
Right.
We can dismantle this mess.
Which leads us now into the wonderful two-day conference that is about to happen here in Houston, October 18th and 19th at the Central Campus. And we're going to have both of them talk to us a little bit about it. It's called A Way Forward, Healing Racism, a conference to explore dismantling institutional racism, Central College Learning Hub, 1300 Holman, October 18th and 19th, Friday and Saturday. This conference is geared to do exactly what you just were talking about, but a deep dive in different areas that impact upon this thing called institutional racism. So let's talk a little bit about the conference.
But before we talk about the conference,
All right.
I would like to say, Sandy Boy, 29 years ago, walked into this space of dialogue racism. And it was on her birthday, and she tells this story all the time.
That's why you wanted to get this in.
And
Okay.
she said that was the best birthday present she's ever given it to herself. Well, the interesting thing about it, she never left. And her words that she would put forth, I want to end racism in my lifetime.
Yep.
And she took this to her church, her campus. She took it everywhere. And now, she said, it's time not to just talk about racism, but we need to be doing something about institutionalized racism. And that's how a conference was born.
And you're so right, because it's not enough to be a non-racist anymore. You have to actively be engaged in dismantling racism. I know lots of people that are non-racist, but they ain't doing nothing to help move the bar of racism or fight anything or get involved in anything. So just being a nice person who don't wish anybody ill harm and never would do anything to anybody is not enough.
That's white privilege too.
We
don't have to do anything.
Exactly. So the conference will give you the equipment, the skills, and sets and comfortableness you need to do something. So tell us about the conference.
We have a diversity of programs, as you see there.
Yep.
We're going to begin with Christiane Caballero from Texas Appleseed, who is going to talk about what is being done in a variety of areas: real estate, policing, We're not sure how that's going to turn out. It's going to be a panel discussion,
Right.
and we're going to see what happens.
All right. I hope no shootings happen between now and then either. So go ahead.
Very sure.
Right.
But first of all, Cherry and Laura are going to ask us the question, are we really ready to talk about racism? Because at some point you've got to realize it's time to step up. Are we ready?
And what does it really mean to talk about racism from an institutional standpoint?
And so that's going to set us up for this.
Right.
And then Christiane is going to come in. We're going to see how they're working. This is boots on the ground, people.
Right, right.
And I don't have the program in front of me, and I made some changes at the end. If I'm going to go through this, I've got to see the details here. Well, that takes us to lunch on the first day.
But it really is setting the right context and the right frame, right? Because I think if the frame and the context is set properly for the rest of the day and a half, people are going to realize that this needs to be a different kind of conversation than we've had before.
Yes.
We need to go deeper into what are the real issues that cause this thing to happen every day, to be played out the way it's played out in people's lives every day. And what can you personally do, and your organization can do, your church, parish, temple, synagogue, a mosque can do, but what would you have to get engaged? It's an engagement.
And we're trying to go one step beyond. There have been conferences to talk about institutionalized racism. I haven't found any that got beyond trying to
Right.
figure out how to define it.
Right, right.
And so we looked for examples of efforts to make change. And that's what we're trying to showcase. I'm sure you know Juan Paris and Anna Paris, who have been working on environmental issues for decades. I know I've worked with them for 2 decades at least, trying to figure out what we can get the big organizations to do to make the quality of the air and the
And
water.
environmental justice is a big issue right now. 'Cause
Big
just look
issue.
where the dumping grounds are around the city, which neighborhoods, which zip codes.
And once I got through their stuff, I was like, we need to spend 2 days on this
Right,
alone.
yeah.
That's going to be the shortcoming of the conference. So we have folks talking about education, what's happening to children of color, what's happening to black women scholars, and their lived experience in the academy. And you know Craig Ottinger, I'm sure, is going to talk
He's
about
been-
his theory about how this came to be and give us some ideas about how we can get a sense of how to take it apart.
And his theory is a pretty solid one, too.
He is a scholar and a half.
Yeah.
And then we're going to have another HCC faculty, Lindsay Gary, talking about the role of the professor in addressing this issue. And then we have some serious professionals talking about transforming pain to power, framing racial justice advocacy. So we're going to get real serious there. And of course, Joe Fagan is coming. You know Joe Fagan, I'm sure.
We work
And
together.
talk about the white racial frame to help us understand what this white
Right,
privilege thing
right.
is all about in terms of thinking. And that's gonna be eye-opening. He's got a new book talking about this. And then we have some folks coming from Texas A&M talking about how to use storytelling in addressing the issue of racism.
Good point. All life is just stories along the journey, so sharing our stories always is a good thing.
And you may know Jeff Reese.
I do.
President of Houston Peace and
You
Justice
got
Center.
them all together here. So.
And we've got him at the end so that, but of course it's going to have to end and we have to leave the building at 4. So
Right.
I'm sure he will take us out to the yard to continue the conversation. Go over to
That'll work.
Axelrod.
That'll work. Yeah, a little wine goes a long way at this
and
point.
we will continue the conversation.
Okay.
It
All right.
won't
Let's
be-
count on that. We'll
it won't end.
We'll sojourn over to
It won't end.
Right. And as I always commit to Sherry when we've done these things over the past, we will do a follow-up to this at the Houston Public Library in November, beginning of November, for those who want to come and kind of carry on the dialogue, but talk about with a little more time and specificity, what can you, the individual, do? How can you engage? Here are the organizations you can pair with, you can partner with, but you got to do something.
We're going to have a number of organizations with tables
Yep.
at the conference
Yep.
to find out something about what different organizations are doing to try to dismantle this or that or the other. And people can volunteer to work with them,
Got
make
it.
donations to help them. And so we'll learn what's actually being done out there in the real world to make
Well,
a
we look
difference.
forward to having you there. I get to MC it and ramrod it, should be fun. To really try to pull all this together within the 2 days we have. There's a lot to cover, but we will do it. And we'll do it in a very thoughtful way. We'll do it in a way that allows your cognitive, affective, and behavioral parts of your being to experience what we're talking about, because you have to take it from here to get it down to here in your heart to figure out what action behaviors you want to do around these issues. So I think the beauty of the conference is geared to make you think, but you got to take that thinking and that deep thought into feeling and to get some kind of passion going about what we need to do. Because many times we have these conferences and it all kind of stays here, ends up being a heady thing. But I think we really worked hard in looking at, as you talked about the day and the flow, to get people to really begin to internalize, to process, to go through your internal filtering system so it works down into where your gut starts yearning about needing to do something. And that's really what we hope comes out of this kind of day.
And we want people to show up.
Yep.
Because one of the things that you have to take into consideration, institutions are made up of individuals. Institutions
Yes.
are made up
Yes.
of people.
Yes.
And I can never, advocate enough
Right.
to say people work on yourself so that you can be the best self, showing up in an institution trying to administer justice.
You may need to work on changing your own institution, where you sit, where you stand, right? We got to get out of here. Thank you, ladies. It's going to be a great
We
conference.
thank you for your help.
gonna be
and
fun.
Look forward to seeing you there.
It's going to be fun. So I'm going to leave you with this thought. As we pose this conference, again, October 18th and 19th, we'll be plugging it for the next few weeks until then to get you there. But here's the piece I want to end with. This really revolves around the ability to ask the higher ethical question. What is the fair and ethical treatment of all human beings? That's where we have to get. What's that baseline? What does that look like? The fair ethical treatment of all human beings. If I can answer that question, get some kind of agreement, I can talk about the second two ancillaries that go with that. All human beings' lives matter. All human beings are equal. But I can't have that second part of those two questions, which is the equity and equality question, until we address the first one. And end on this thought. The Episcopal Health Foundation just completed a survey that talks about health determinants, social determinants of health in various communities across this city. Do you know, depending on which zip code you live in this city, there's a 20-year gap in your life expectancy, a 20-year gap in your life expectancy depending on which zip code, right around this, probably this campus that way. If you live that way in another zip code, you got a 20-year plus to your life. That's wrong in the city of Houston. That's wrong in the fourth largest metropolitan city. That's wrong in a city that's trying to figure out how to move from diversity to pluralism, how to move from tolerance to acceptance, how to move to understand that we're all in this as human beings. We can do better, Houston. We got to go. Come to the conference and we'll start the dialogue. I got to get out of here, they tell me, so until then, as always, we'll see you again next week. Peace, power, and love.